Welcome blended young people. For this week's STEAM classes, we're looking at Australian food, and one of the foods that we have talked about or will be talking about this week are ANZAC biscuits, which are very Australian. So I thought that we might do something a little bit different this week and actually do some cooking and make some. So welcome to my kitchen. I'm going to guide you through the recipe. You'll have a copy of the recipe in Canvas that you can follow, and I will show you step by step how to go about making these. Now in a moment, I'm just going to show you my bench here because I've got out all of my ingredients and all of the equipment that I'm going to need, and I'm also going to preheat my oven. Now the recipe says that we need to do that to 170 degrees, and the reason we preheat an oven is because when we first turn it on, it's not going to be at 170 degrees straight away. So we need to leave it for at least 10 minutes to warm up to that temperature. So that's always one of the first things that you will do when you are baking. So I will show you all of my ingredients and all of the equipment that I have so that you know what types of things that you need to get out before we get started. Okay, so here we are in my kitchen. I have just preheated my oven, so I'll leave that going and warming up while I'm making the mixture for the biscuits, and then as soon as I've got them all on the tray, the oven will be at the correct temperature and they'll be ready to put in. Right, so if we look over here at my bench top, I have got a baking tray here. Now I've chosen to line mine with baking paper, and you can probably see that I have folded it so that it's sitting flat on the tray. Good tip to learn, because if you don't take care with putting down that baking paper flat, then your biscuits are not going to bake flat. Okay, so that's a really good tip to remember. If you don't have any baking paper, you can use a baking tray and grease it with some melted butter. That will work just as well. Okay, I've got my mixing bowl. Okay, so that's ready to make the mixture in. I've got a cooling rack to cool my biscuits on when they come out of the oven. If you don't have one of these, it doesn't matter. You can leave them to cool on the tray. I've also got here some measuring equipment. So I've got my set of measuring cups. Okay, very, very handy to have in the kitchen. If you don't have a set of measuring cups, I have put on the recipe the ingredients in grams so that you would be able to weigh them instead. I've got my set of measuring spoons here. I've also got a set of scales because I do need to weigh the butter, and I have a saucepan here because we do need to melt the butter on the stove top. Just make sure that if you are doing these at home that you have the permission of your parents or guardians to be using things such as the hot plates and the oven. Right, so over here, I've got my recipe over there on the bench, but I've also got all of my ingredients out so that they're ready. I know that I have everything that I need. Okay, so if we run down the recipe itself, which I just need to grab so that I can see the ingredients that we need. Okay, I'll just put that over here. Right, so we need plain flour, which I have in my tub here. We need rolled oats. I bought a new packet of that on the weekend. We need some sugar. I'm using caster sugar, but if you've just got regular white sugar, that will be fine as well. Some desiccated coconut. I've been using this packet for other recipes, but there's plenty in there for this recipe today. Some melted butter or margarine. So if you haven't got butter but you've got margarine, you can use that. I've got butter, so that's this block here. You will also need some golden syrup, which I've got in this tub here. Some bicarb of soda or bicarbonate of soda, which is in that tub there. And then some water just straight out of your tap. Okay, when you have a look at the recipe, it's really important that you are making sure that you are getting the correct amounts of the ingredients. Okay, so I'm just going to start measuring mine, and then I'll come back to you to show you what I've done, and we'll get started with the recipe. Right, so I've started to measure some of my ingredients. So you can see there that I've got my 1 cup of rolled oats, and just down here I've got my half a cup of sugar. Over on the scales you can see that I've measured 150 grams of butter, but I haven't yet measured my coconut, which is this one here, or the flour. And the reason that I haven't done that is because if your house is like my house, I only have 1 set of measuring cups. So I need to pour in some of the ingredients and then use those cups again to measure some more ingredients. So the first one that we'll pour into this mixing bowl is my 1 cup of rolled oats. Now you can see that I have made sure that the top of it is nice and flat. So when it says 1 cup of an ingredient, it means 1 level cup. Okay, so we don't want to have it all heaped up because then there'll be too much of that ingredient. So I'm going to pour that one in. The next one that I'm going to put into there is my half a cup of sugar. Okay, again, I've done the same thing. I've leveled off the top. So I'm going to pour that one in. All right. The reason I haven't measured the coconut yet is because the recipe says 3/4 of a cup of desiccated coconut. In the set of most measuring cups, you won't have a 3/4 cup. So what we do have is we have a 1 cup, we have a half cup, we have a 1/3 cup, which I've put away because I don't need it today, and we have a 1/4 cup. So here we need to use a bit of maths and think about fractions. So I don't have a 3/4 cup. So there's actually 2 ways that I can measure the coconut to make sure that I get the right amount. What we can do is use our 1/4 cup and fill it up 3 times. Or if you're a little bit better at working out fractions, you will know that you can do half a cup plus a 1/4 of a cup, and that will also equal 3/4 of a cup. Either way that you want to do it is fine. The other thing I also need to measure is 1.5 cups of plain flour. All right, so make sure that you've got the plain flour, not the self-raising flour. So I'm going to just measure those out and we'll put those into the bowl. So I used my 1/4 cup. I filled it up level to the top and I poured it into this 1 cup here so that I could use it again and then again. Okay, so I did that 3 times. So what I have in here now is actually 3/4 of a cup of coconut. The last ingredient that needs to go into the bowl at this stage is that plain flour. I needed 1.5 cups. Now we don't have a 1.5 cup either, so what I had to do was use my fractions again, and I have got 1 cup of flour and a half a cup of the flour. I've leveled them off on the top of the cups to make sure that they are accurate and level. So they're going to go into the bowl now. So what I'm putting into the bowl at the moment are what we call our dry ingredients. Okay, so in here I now have my flour, my rolled oats, my sugar and my coconut. They're the first 4 ingredients listed on your recipe. Once you've put all of those into your bowl, you just need to take a spoon and just start to stir them to combine them. Our next step after that is to get ready to melt our butter and add in our golden syrup. But I just want to stir this so it's all really well mixed and nice and even. And while you're going about doing this, I want you to have a think about the ingredients that we're using and why these might have been used to make ANZAC biscuits during wartime. I'm just getting ready to melt my butter and my golden syrup. So I've got the butter sitting in a saucepan. I'm not at the stove yet. And I've filled up my measuring spoons. The largest measuring spoon is called 1 tablespoon, and it actually says it on the handle of the spoon. I need 2 tablespoons of this golden syrup. Obviously it's very, very thick and sticky like honey, so you're going to have to do this sort of one at a time. But I made sure it was level. I'm going to pour that in. And I'm also then, in a moment, I'm going to get a teaspoon out of my drawer so I can scoop out all of the syrup from the spoon, and then I'm going to measure out another tablespoon because the recipe says we need 2 tablespoons in with the butter. I'm just about ready to start melting the butter and the golden syrup together, but before we do that, we need to make up a little mixture of our bicarb of soda with some water just straight out of the tap. Now this is the bicarb of soda here, and we only need half a teaspoon. Now when we look at our measuring spoons, the half teaspoon is the second smallest one. So make sure that you are measuring this one accurately, because if you put too much in, unfortunately, it'll make your biscuits taste horrible. So we're going to do the same thing. Just dip this in here. Give it a bit of a tap to make sure that it's level. And I'm going to mix this up in my measuring cup that I used before to measure my dry ingredients, because that saves on the washing up then, less things to wash up. So I've put that into there, and now I'm going to mix through 1.5 tablespoons of water just from the tap. Now we don't have a half tablespoon, unfortunately. So what you're going to need to do, I'll just get my spoons ready here to show you. Okay, so you can see here, I've got a 1 tablespoon, that's the biggest one. The next biggest one is a teaspoon. So to make 1.5 tablespoons, you need to actually use 1 tablespoon and 2 teaspoons, which equals 1.5 tablespoons, okay? On your recipe, it says 30 mils. If you have a look on my spoons here, it tells you the size of them, but it also tells you how many mils they hold. So we can see that 20 mils is in the tablespoon. The teaspoon holds 5 mils. So we need 30 mils altogether. So we use 1 tablespoon to get 20 mils and 2 of the teaspoons, which will equal 10 mils. Add those together and we get our 30 mils. Right, you can see my butter and golden syrup sitting in the saucepan on the stove, ready to go. And in this cup here, I know you can't see it very well, but I've mixed in the 1.5 tablespoons of water with my half of a teaspoon of bicarb of soda. It just looks like water at the moment, but when this mixture here has melted and is warm, we're going to add that in and you'll see what happens. So I'm going to turn this hot plate on now, but we want to make sure that it's on a low heat. So I've turned it down to low. Reason being that butter and the syrup, if we have the temperature too high, can burn very quickly and easily. So we're better off having it on a low temperature and for it taking a little bit longer, but making sure that it's melting properly. The other thing, and you can see that it started there, the other thing that we need to be careful of when we are stirring things in a hot saucepan is that we shouldn't be using a metal spoon. There's a couple of things that you can use. I'm going to use this here, which is made of silicone. It's called a scraper. Okay, you might have some other types of spoons or things made out of silicone. They're perfectly fine. Also a wooden spoon would be great to use as well. The reason we're not going to use a metal spoon is because metal conducts heat very, very well, and that spoon is going to get very hot and you could potentially burn your hand. All right, so I'm just going to let this go, and then once it's melted, I'm going to show you what happens when we add in that bicarb of soda mixture. The butter and golden syrup have all melted together. I've still got the heat on very low. I'm just going to add in now the bicarb of soda mixture that's mixed with the water, and you'll see that this will start to bubble up because of the heat. So I'm just giving this a bit of a swirl around just to make sure that it's all combined, and you'll see what happens when we add this in. Okay, you can see that that's all starting to bubble. Looks a little bit like an explosion has happened. All right, so I'll just give that a bit of a stir. And at this stage, as it's bubbling up and coming closer to the top, we need to turn the heat off, and then we're going to very carefully take our saucepan to our bowl and pour this into our dry ingredients. So I've poured that butter mixture into my dry ingredients. You can see it still looks quite sort of frothy and bubbly, which is fine. The other thing you need to make sure that you do is scrape out as much of that as you can get out of the saucepan. We don't want to leave any of it behind. We need it all in the bowl. Just be very careful because obviously the saucepan is still hot, and this mixture is going to be quite warm as well. So we need to be careful of that also. Now, once you have poured that in, we're back now to our metal spoon that we started with earlier, and we need to make sure that we're mixing all of that liquid through, the liquid ingredients that we just melted together, all the way through our dry ingredients, so everything is coated in that butter mixture. Everything's now being combined. There's no dry mixture anywhere in this bowl, so I gave it a really good stir. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use our measuring spoons again, but the tablespoon. If you don't have a tablespoon, this type of spoon will be fine, but you just want to make sure that all of your biscuits are going to be approximately the same size as best you can. So we're going to take tablespoonfuls of this mixture, okay, and we're going to level that against the side of the bowl. All right. And then when we get that out of our measuring spoon, we're going to roll it into balls and we're going to place it on the tray. Now you need to leave a little bit of space between each one on the tray. I will show you in a few minutes when I've done mine, just because they will spread out a little bit as they cook, and we need to leave room for them to spread so that they don't all become one big biscuit on the tray. I've seen that happen a few times before, so we want to try and avoid that. All right, so once I've got some set up on the tray, I'll show you what they look like, and then we'll get them into the oven. You can see that I have rolled the tablespoonfuls of the mixture into balls, and they all look pretty even. I've spread them out on the tray so they've got room to spread as they are baking. So you can see how much of a gap I've left between them. So I've got 12 on this tray. I've actually got enough mixture to do another tray. But if you have some left over, you could either do a second tray of biscuits, or the mixture would keep covered over in the fridge for a few days, and you could then make another batch a few days later and just roll them into balls and put them on the tray. What we need to do now before we put them into the oven is we need to just lightly flatten them, and I just use my 2 fingers to do that. Don't squash them like a pancake. All right, so we're just going to press them down like so, and once we've done all of that, we're going to put them into the oven, and we also need to make sure that we set a timer so that we know when to come back and check them. Right, the tray's ready to go into the oven. So I'm just putting it in now. Don't forget to set a timer either on the oven or on your phone for so that you don't forget to come back and check on them. Right, the recipe says we're baking for 12 minutes or until golden brown. Now, all ovens are different from each other. So you might find that yours are nice and golden brown after 10 minutes. You might find that they're still not really golden brown after 15 or 16 minutes. You just have to have a look at them, and when they've gone golden brown on the top, you will know that they're ready to take out. But we'll set the timer for 12 minutes because that's what the recipe says. When they come out of the oven, and we'll have a look at them when they do come out of the oven, when you touch them, they're still going to be very soft. So they don't actually firm up until they cool down. So don't think, oh, they're not ready because they're still really soft. They will be, they just need a chance to cool down and for the butter that's in them to set back into being a solid. While your biscuits are baking, it is now dishes time. Right, so you still do need to do your cleaning up after you have got them into the oven, and it's a really good time to do it because then you're still in the kitchen getting that job done and can be keeping an eye on the oven. The other thing that I really like to do is to tidy up as I go, put things into the sink or the dishwasher as I'm going along, and I also put the ingredients away after I've used them. But everybody cooks differently, so I'll leave that up to you, but don't forget, you're in charge of doing the dishes also. So it might have come up to 12 minutes. And as I get a bit closer to have a look at them, they're beautiful and golden brown. Make sure you are wearing oven mitts when you take the tray out. Okay, see these are lovely and golden brown, just the way I like them. If you like them a bit darker, you could leave them in for another couple of minutes, but that's the way that I like them. So I'm going to take the tray out, bring it over here and put it onto my stove top. I'm not putting it straight down onto the bench top because the heat from the tray can damage the bench top. And then I need to come back, close the oven door, and then turn the oven off. Now, once these have cooled down for a few minutes, let them cool for a few minutes because, don't touch them too much, but they're still really soft, okay? We need to let them cool for a few minutes and then we're going to transfer them onto the cooling rack. If you don't have a cooling rack, don't worry, you can just let them cool on the tray. If you could smell my kitchen at the moment, it smells delicious. So my biscuits have been cooling for a few minutes and I'm now just transferring them onto the cooling rack to let them cool down properly. Now the reason we use a cooling rack, if you have one, is it allows the air to get in here underneath and to cool the bottoms of the biscuits. But as I said, don't worry if you haven't got one, just leave them on the tray. After that, then it's time for you to enjoy them, and I hope that you do enjoy them.